The views expressed in this program do not necessarily reflect those of this station.
Welcome to Insights into Northeast Michigan, a WBKB News public affairs program. Insights deals with the issues affecting those in the community, as well as Northeast Michigan and the state. And now, Insights into Northeast Michigan.
Good morning and welcome to this edition of Insights. I'm Aaron Parsegian, and today we're going to be talking about President Trump's proposed budget and how some of the cuts he made would have an effect here on northern Michigan. And joining me this morning is United States Senator Gary Peters. Senator Peters, thank you for being here. How are you doing?
I'm well, Aaron. How are you doing?
I'm doing well.
Good, good.
So I wanted to start the program talking about President Trump's proposed cuts to the Essential Air Services program. As you know, Alpena is home to the Alpena County Regional Airport, and that airport relies heavily on EAS program funding. So Senator Peters, what kind of impact would cuts to the Essential Air program have on the area of Northeast Michigan?
Well, I'm very concerned about these cuts that are being proposed by President Trump to basically eliminate essential air service in airports across the country. But it'll have a special impact to Alpena. The Alpena Airport is the beneficiary of these resources, which allows folks who live in more rural areas to have access to air service. It's important for economic development. It's important for folks to have access to an airport to connect to other places around the country and around the world. And most of these airports would not operate without this type of essential air service funding. And so I'm going to be fighting very aggressively against this. I think it would have a very negative impact for Alpena and for economic development in Alpena. And that's why we've got to fight to restore that funding.
Now, say something as drastic as cutting the entire Essential Air Services program from the budget were to occur. Would that mean that regional airports in northern Michigan would be forced to shut down?
Well, it's quite frankly, it's very difficult to have any kind of commercial air services in very small markets without some of these subsidies. So although the Alpena airport may stay open, there wouldn't be necessarily, but potentially, any commercial service for folks. It would simply be for general aviation. But we need to have commercial services. People have to be able to go to Alpena Airport and connect to other flights around the country. Otherwise, there'll be a very long drive for people to find an airport. It could be as far as Lansing or Marquette.
And Senator Peters, I don't know if you've talked with any of your constituents in Washington, but Republican Congressman Jack Bergman, who represents the 1st District here in northern Michigan, is also opposed to the cutting of the Essential Air Services program. So I was wondering if there were any plans to work with people across parties to save the EAS program.
I will certainly be working very closely with my colleagues across the aisle. This should be a bipartisan issue. You know, in the United States Senate, I work with a number of U.S. senators who come from rural states. They also have opposition to this. So we are hoping to push back. I think it's important to remember that even though the president may propose a budget, ultimately it's up to the Congress to actually pass those budgets. We still have the power of the purse, the ability to fund this. And I'm certainly hoping I can bring both Democrats and Republicans together. That's the way I work here in Washington, and that's how I think we'll be successful in hopefully restoring this funding.
And just so for our viewers' sake, when you say you are going to fight for the Essential Air Service program, how does a senator like yourself go about doing so?
Well, the way we do that, we'll go through an appropriation process, and various items are funded as a result of that, and I will be working to make sure that Essential Air Service receives the money. I'll be working with some of my colleagues. I serve on an aviation subcommittee as part of my work in the Commerce Committee, and so I will work with my fellow senators, both Democrats and Republicans, to make sure that it stays in the appropriations. So it's an ongoing process. We'll then have different kinds of budget items will be debated. But I do believe that I'll be able to work with my colleagues in the Senate to do what we can to restore this funding as much as possible.
Now, moving away from the Essential Air Service program, another thing that would affect residents in the United States and here in Michigan is President Trump's proposed cuts to the EPA. I wanted to ask you, with the proposed 31% cut to the entire EPA budget, how would that cut affect the Great Lakes and Great Lakes research? Because as you know, Alpena right here is situated on beautiful Lake Huron.
No, I'm very concerned about significant cuts to the EPA, the work that they do, particularly to protect the Great Lakes. There isn't anything more important as far as a natural resource for us in the state of Michigan than the Great Lakes. The EPA is a big part of making sure we have clean water in the Great Lakes. Among programs that are looked at as a cut, in fact, President Trump wants to cut the entire Great Lakes Restoration Fund, which is about making sure we're cleaning up some of the toxic sites that are leaching pollution into the Great Lakes. He also wants to cut some of the funding for invasive species like the sea lamprey, which we have a facility outside of Alpena that does very important research to reduce that creature from being in the lakes. So these are significant programs, including NOAA. President Trump is looking for a 20% cut to NOAA, and with the marine sanctuary in Alpena, I'm very worried about that. That's been an incredible resource for the folks in Alpena. It's brought tourism dollars. It's about economic development. So we have a number of very serious issues. I'm very concerned that the president wants to have these drastic cuts to the Great Lakes. They are an important resource for us from a recreational standpoint, but we also have to remember the Great Lakes provide drinking water for over 40 million Americans. We should be stepping up and making sure that those lakes are as clean as possible and can continue to be available, not just for us, but for future generations.
All right, Senator Peters, thank you so much for your time this morning.
Thank you. Thank you.
And there is more insights coming up, so stay tuned because there's even more after the break.